I am sitting here in beautiful San Diego, California, and I know that you are scattered throughout the world, and I'm excited to know just where you are. I would pick up my camera and show you my wonderful view from my home office to make you jealous if you're sitting in the snow, but it's still a little bit dark here, so maybe when we're done, I can show it to you. So it would be so fun for me if you could just real quick chat into the chat where you are. And we have two people. Marianne is watching the chat, and she can tell me where you are. And that would be kind of nice for me to be able to picture you. So do that for just a second and see where you are located. Let me know if anything comes in.
We've got London, Chicago, Virginia, Alabama, Florida.
Wow.
Lots of people in Illinois.
Lots of people in Illinois. Good old Chicago.
San Diego, Wisconsin.
Okay. Others in San Diego. Well, you started off with one of my favorite cities on the planet. Welcome, London. I will be there soon. I'm so glad you're here, and everyone else who is here. I have to thank Charlene and Marianne, who've made this transition to doing this program so easy for me. I want to thank for all the input I got from everyone to help me understand really what your needs are in this regard. And I really enjoyed Lisa's opening video. She states it, you know, very specific to you and very aware also of the bigger picture, both of which are very, very lucky. As Charlene said, you will get the 3 Keys book on your HT, on your in-house broadcast when this is over. And you're going to see that it's going to reinforce some of the material that we're going to cover here. And then it also has some other material. So take a look at it. I think you'll enjoy it. And I'm hoping that throughout the program, you'll have a moment when you can chat in questions. And we're going to try to leave a couple of minutes at the end when you can get those questions asked and answered. Little tight for time. Can't promise, but I've said to Charlene, feel free to make my contact information available to any of you. And I'd be glad to answer your questions because this material I think is fascinating. And at times it's simple and at other times it's a little bit complicated. So I want you to know that I'm here for you. But before I start, there's one thing I was really moved to say when I learned who you are and what you do. And this is personal to me. What you do in your work is you make people's dreams come true. I mean, you are the people, you as an organization is the organization that allows people to get educated and to reach their dreams, no matter what those dreams are, and be living their lives at the same time. That if they weren't privileged enough to neatly go through 4 years of high school and then go on to a university that was expensive, or they had to work to support their families, or whatever the situation was. I just wanted to take 15 seconds and thank you that you exist, because the work that you are doing is so important at boosting up our culture, the world, and the dreams of individual people. So, and what you're doing with the unconscious bias material and inclusion and diversity just adds to the richness of that. So I'm looking forward to our hour together. So here's what we're up to. This is a journey we are on. And this journey that I'm going to take you through, and that I hope you continue in your lives, is to help you discover techniques for defeating the biases that prevent us from leading and functioning successfully. Now, I've been on this journey for a lot of years. I've been at it, sort of 30 years or so. I still have biases. I can spot them now fairly well, and I can work on them. But I tell you, I've found it exciting because you learn about yourself and you see your world that's around you just a little cleaner and a little bit crisper. It's beyond the desperately important issue that Lisa talked about treating people with respect and building an inclusive workplace and taking care of your customers properly. It's about seeing the world more clearly. So I hope you enjoy this journey. And again, I hope that you'll continue it after we're done with the program. So a principle for you to remember throughout. Here's our route. Apologize. Here's our route. We're going to start off and we're going to talk about the basics of bias, definition, how it works within the brain. Then we're going to take a look at the business case. There's a lot I could say about the business case, and we'll see how our time is as to how far I go beyond this issue of innovation. But innovation to me is the biggest single most important aspect of the business case and pertains perfectly to your world of education. Third, we're going to talk about how we can become aware of our biases. Lisa mentioned that as well. I think that is such a cool way to start us off and to give you a skill that you can take with you as you live your lives. And finally, we're going to take a look at techniques for defeating bias. So that's the journey that we're going to be on. So remember this throughout. Don't forget this. Having bias does not make us bad people, okay? It's what we do about it that matters. I emphasize this so strongly because if we believe that we're bad people because we have a bias, we're not going to look at them. If I believed I was a bad person for having inflexible beliefs about people, I wouldn't want to know them because I wouldn't want to know that about myself. And that's why I emphasize this so strongly. And I'd like to ask you, as you work with your colleagues, to help them better understand their attitudes, be more inclusive in your workplace, work harder for equity. Remember this principle that I'm not talking here about blatant acts of bias, but the way to get people to listen to you and the way to get them to change is to say, we're all in this thing together. Here's some tools we can work on. So keep that tone in mind as you work with others and as we go through this material. So let's start with the basics. And the first thing is I'd like us to do a real quick chat. I would like you, and Marianne and Leslie are going to monitor, I would like you to chat into the chat box words or phrases that you would put into a definition of bias as we are using it here today with respect to diversity and inclusion. So go ahead and chat in some words. I'd like to kind of see where you are with that.
Got stereotyping, preconceived notions, prejudgment.
Good, good.
Assumed ideas based on previous experiences.
Yeah.
Predetermined.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. You guys really do. Thank you for that. You've got it. This is the definition I use, and it's got everything you just said in it. A bias is an inflexible, positive or negative, conscious or unconscious belief about a particular category of people. Inflexible, that's the stereotype that you mentioned, okay? The idea is that you get it in your head that everybody, inflexible, of a group of people are a particular way. We'll be looking at examples as we go along. This isn't a preference for one person. It isn't that you know one person or three people who have a particular characteristic and that you know that as a fact, and they do, and you look at them and yes, they're good at math, or yes, they're bad at this, or yes, they tend to be this way, or they like certain colors, whatever. That has to do with individuals, right? That you know as a fact. This is to do with groups of people. Now, notice something interesting about this definition that might just surprise you. Positive or negative. The content of an inflexible belief can be about a good characteristic or a bad characteristic, and they are both damaging. Yes, bad characteristics are worse, I think, yes, but they both keep us from being able to see individuals for who they are. So I was going to maybe have you chat this in, but I kind of don't want to put you in this spot. I was going to have you say, chat in some positive characteristics that we tend to apply to categories of people, but I'm not going to make you do it because that kind of opens you up to feeling bad. Okay. So let me give you a couple of examples. All women are nurturing, right? All women, every last one of them are nurturing. That's a good thing to be, being nurturing. So basically what we're saying is that every single woman, would rather than go to Europe every summer, would rather, have this stranger in her house that she has to put through college, that she has to get to know. I mean, some people want the freedom. Some people want the flexibility. Very common one, all Black men are athletic, very common. All Asians are good at math. Okay. When I say them, they feel silly to me. I feel almost uncomfortable saying these words, even though they're positive. And the reason that I'm uncomfortable is that they keep us from seeing individuals for who they are. And that's what inclusion and diversity and equity really are all about, is honoring individuals. So as we explore our biases in this program, keep the definition in mind. You're good people. Probably a lot of the biases that you may hold are about positive characteristics. I know mine tend to be, but let's watch for those because they still prevent us from seeing an individual for who they are. So a bias is an inflexible, positive or negative, conscious or unconscious belief about a category of people. That's what we are attacking today. Let's do a little activity here. Now, Will has volunteered to help us out with this, but I would ask you to do this activity on your own inside your head. I am not going to tell you why we are doing this right now, but I am going to lead you through 4 steps, 4 things I need you to think about. So let's start with the first one. I'd like you to start, and Will give us his impact a little later on, to think of a person whom you very much admire. I've got someone in my head right this minute. Someone that you wish you could be more like, that you would like to have like you and admire you. Someone you very much admire. So think of that person just for a second. Okay, got them in your head? All right. Now, I'd like you to think of someone whom you can't stand. I know that's a little less pleasant, but think of someone that you don't like at all. And let me see, give me a second. I got to do mine. Okay, I've got mine in my head too. Now, starts to get tricky. 3. Think of a quality that you dislike about your most admired person. Dislike. I'm going to give you a second to do that one. And then I'd like you, ready? Okay, to think of a quality that you like about your most disliked person. I know, you're in pain, right? If I could see your faces, you're probably all going, oh, what's this woman doing to us? Okay, so person you very much admire, someone you dislike, think of a quality that you don't like about your admired person, and a quality that you like about your disliked person. I'd like to go ahead and invite Will to tell me what he came up with or what his experience was with this.
Hey, Sandra. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. this was a really challenging exercise activity. And I wanted to mention one thing I like also from the Lisa's video, and that she said it's a good opportunity for us to learn about ourselves. And that's exactly this type of activity. So thinking about the person that I very much admire. I think this was the easiest part at all. I have a lot of names on my mind. But the challenging part here was to find a quality or something that I dislike that would really matter. I realized in doing this exercise that I have a tendency to minimize or ignore or even forgive negative aspects of a person that I really admire. I think that was really the challenge part for me. And speaking about the person that I very much dislike, um, I learned something interesting doing this activity. As a personal note, I realized that I don't like to spend time thinking about people that I don't like and why I don't like them. And in order, because of that, I selected two people in two different categories to try to do this exercise. And for the first one, I had a really hard time to recognize any positive quality. And for the second one, I almost changed my mind whether keep this person in the category of they are very much dislike, and then move to another like not that I admire. But I was thinking, okay, maybe I have some bias for the second one. I don't think I really don't like him at all. So anyway, so it's a really challenging exercise.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking that on so deeply and so intelligently. And what you're modeling here is how stuck we can get. And this activity, thank you for that, Will. This activity, we're thinking about an individual. So it's not really the inflexible belief about a whole category that we're talking about here, but what we are talking about is the stuckness, okay? It's okay to like and dislike people. You know, we all know people we like and we don't like, but the problem is the stuckness that you so well described. So as we move through this material on our biases, watch your resistance. Think back to how you may have resisted thinking something good about someone that you don't like and something bad about someone that you do like. I go through it. There's one person in my head, an elderly woman, she's now deceased. And she's actually what this activity grew from, because this woman to me was so fine. I mean, one of the good people on the planet. And I know she had foibles, and the family would say, you know what, she's really not being very cool about this, or you know what, that she's not right there. Said, no, she's right, because I could not see any flaws, and I still choose not to. But that's how stuck we can get. So as we move through our biases, remember how stuck we can get when we have someone that just pushes our buttons and we don't like very much. That flexibility is what's going to make us better leaders and better human beings. Okay, let's look at the business case real quick on this. I am going to talk about one aspect of the business case. Now, we can do all kinds of things. I mean, we could talk about the importance of having a diverse student body. We can talk about the importance of not discriminating and all the rest of it. And I'm checking my time here. Think whether time to do a little bit of that. Let me go ahead with my main point, and then we'll see where we end up at the end of this section. Innovation. Biases that can interfere with our ability to innovate. And the reason is that when you have teams that are homogeneous, the ideas, the differences in the ideas just simply don't happen. We need an environment in our schools, whether they're in-person schools or whether they're online schools, and in our communities, in which mixed teams have the opportunity to work together freely without biases stopping them. And I am looking at studies here, looking at University of Michigan, University of North Texas, MIT, George Mason, Yale. All of them have discovered that when you have a mixed team, whether it be among your faculty or whether it be among your student population, you get more innovation. And I find that absolutely fascinating. And if we had more time together, or if we were in person, I love to kick all this around. Why? Why is it that when we have people of different backgrounds, we end up with more innovation? For one thing, first of all, you've got differing ideas, right? I mean, people come from different backgrounds, they have differing ideas. That's the simple part. But there's also kind of a creative tension that happens. I have a feeling that if we could do a breakout group and had the time for that, you could tell me situations in which you've been in which you were working with someone different from yourself. And out of that little inability to quite understand what they said, whether it be an accent or a point of view, there's this kind of tension that happens that makes everyone work harder. And everyone listen more carefully, and everyone dig a little deeper to explain their point of view. You've lived this. I can almost feel you out there nodding. I can almost feel it. And we also need to think a little harder because we're communicating with people that might have a slightly different point of view or different background. And we need to understand them a little bit differently. So know that one of the biggest business cases for overcoming our biases is to allow us to really listen to what others are saying, to have our workplaces, our schools, our population be different and really listening to them. Their different points of view. When we have biases like they don't know, or they're not educated in this area, or they're not going to be able to communicate clearly, all this stuff, this innovation, and I'm pointing to my screen, comes to a screeching halt. There are other reasons for the business case. It has to do with, more creative energy. It has to do with being able to have a population that reflects the general population that you're serving. But to me, in a way, since we're short on time, this innovation cuts to the heart of it. And if we have a little time at the end, we can maybe answer any questions that you have about that. So let's start talking about skills. And let's start by looking at skills for bias awareness. Now, I understand that some of you have taken the implicit association test. Bear with me while I go over it just a little bit, because my perspective on it, in my experience, might be a little different than yours, and it might motivate some of you to go back and take it some more. The purpose for the implicit association test, otherwise known as the IAT, is to not so much nail a bias, say, that's my bias, I've got it, I'm messed up in that area, I need to fix it, but to give us a clue to it. It never was intended to be a diagnostic tool. It's more an exploration tool. So as you take it, you can, begin to wake up. I've done it. I've taken it over and over again. And what it tends to do as you take it is it forces your belief to your consciousness, and you begin to notice it more. And what it's doing is it's measuring the speed with which you respond to a particular group that comes up onto your screen. So for those of you, gosh, I don't know whether any of you are not familiar with it, but fundamentally, you take it online. Fundamentally, what happens is you pick a type of group that you would like to take a test around, and sometimes they change through time. It might be people with disabilities, it might be race, it might be skin color, which is different. It might be sexual orientation, it might be particular cultural populations, it might be people with disabilities or not, political parties for that matter. I've watched it through the years change. And to simplify it, fundamentally what happens is a picture depicting a population is on the screen, and you are given a choice of characteristics that that person might have. And you're given the opportunity to push a key that declares that that characteristic applies to that particular person, that type of person, I should say, that's depicted on the screen. The trick here is that it is measuring your answer by speed. It's not measuring what you do so much. So if you were to say, you were conscious thinking, I want to really look good. I want to look so good that when a black face comes up and it says educated or uneducated, I will send it to educated to show them that I don't have a bias, that people of African American heritage aren't as educated, okay? And you do that self-consciously. It's measuring the speed with which you do it. Well, because if that's not organic to you, it's almost magical, but it's really good. If that's not true to what you really believe, it senses that little bit of time difference. And you get to put it very broadly, a lower score on it. So that's the most basic look at what the implicit association test is. It's measuring the speed with which you choose a particular characteristic when faced with a particular group. There are ways to cheat on it, they say, but don't cheat on it. Take it, and you'll learn about yourself. Don't feel real bad. Again, it's a clue. It's a little insight into yourself. I've taken it many times and learned a great deal about myself. So that's worth mentioning, worth reinforcing. It's basically forcing a belief to your consciousness from which you can learn. But I have a different way to do this, to get this consciousness. And I call it the first thoughts process. Fundamentally, it's the same deal. It's just less electronic. And my idea is more portable as well. And we're talking here about forming a habit of noticing the first thought that comes to mind when encountering a member of a group. What is the first thought that you think of? That first thought is not automatically a bias and a flexible belief about a particular category of people. It's not automatically. We have to study. I'll give you questions so you can diagnose it. But it is the core event that we will then analyze. So Chris is going to help us out on this one, but I'm going to take everyone through this very quickly, and then she's going to come on board. What's going to happen is I am going to put up names of groups one by one. There are 5 of them. As each comes up, what I would like you to do is watch the first assumption that comes into your brain as this group comes up. This, by the way, is a wonderful habit to get into as you live your lives and as you work in your various institutions. So I'm going to put up I'm going to change the slide. Name of a group is going to come up. Just watch what pops into your brain. That's all. Don't analyze it. Just what pops in. It's going to only stay there a couple of seconds. Move on to the next one. And then we're going to talk with Chris about what happened with her. Here we go. A person born and raised in Southern California. A 20-year-old BSN student at Chamberlain University. Random. A single mother with 3 children. A homeless person sleeping in a downtown shelter. And a single father with 3 children. Okay. Can anybody, or Chris, go ahead and tell me, you don't have to do all of them. Just pick a couple to give me what your first thought was when that group popped up on the slide.
So for a 21-year-old BSN student at Chamberlain University, I immediately thought of a female.
Okay. Any others?
And then for the homeless person sleeping in a downtown shelter, I thought of someone who is disheveled. right? Like not well kept.
Okay.
And then I'd say a single father with 3 children, I thought of a widow.
Okay. Oh, a widower. Okay. Did you have any response to the single mother with 3 children?
Young, I think.
Okay.
A young mom, a young woman.
Okay. Fascinating. All right. Notice how quickly these came into her mind. I mean, they came very, very quickly. And the exercise is to get in the habit of watching that first thought. That first thought that pops into your brain may or may not be a bias as we're using it here, but it could be. It's a clue. It's a red flag. I think that's a good way to put it. And the way that we know is asking ourselves some questions about that first thought. Like we may know the single mother that lives next door to us, and she is young and she's got these 3 children, and that's what came to mind is her as an individual. But the trick is making sure, are we thinking of an individual, or is this going to be a generalized thought about people born and raised in Southern California like me, being all beachy or outdoorsy, that could influence your response to someone in your workplace or among your student body, whatever it happened to be. It's an awareness issue. Get in that habit, watch that first thought, and then ask yourself 3 questions about that first thought. Ask yourself, was the first thought that you had when encountering someone from a particular group an inflexible generality about the of entire group, or was it an all statement? Was it a statement like, oh, in my head it's everybody, it's all those people, okay? Or was it just a statement about that one person? If it's about that one person, it's not a bias. It's not. But if it was about the entire group, you might be on biased territory. Ask yourself that question and get in the habit of watching those first thoughts. Take that little quick exercise and take it into your life. Look down the street, you see someone, what pops into your brain? Is it a bias? Well, I don't know. Is it inflexible? Are you generalizing to everybody? You might just be on biased territory. Ask yourself, have I had a memorable, positive or negative experience with the group of people in which the characteristic I thought of was manifested? In other words, if you've had an intense experience with the group that was intensely positive bias, or intensely negative bias, you're more apt to be on biased territory in your response. If you haven't had an intense experience, maybe not. But it is experience that are intense, more often negative, by the way, than positive, sadly, that helps create these biases. So ask yourself that question. If the answer is, yeah, I really did. I got held up by a member of that particular population. Okay, you might be on biased territory there, because that's how biases can get created. And finally, would I feel the same way about the significance of this person's behavior or appearance or whatever if they were a different group? Switch them in your head. Would I have the same reaction to this person if they were a different group? Ask yourself that. So this notion of bias awareness is really, really important. Get in that habit of watching the first thought that pops into your brain when you encounter a particular member of a group, just like we did when this came up on a slide, and ask yourself these questions. Was it an all statement? Was it absolutely inflexible about the whole group? Or was it just one person? Was it just that one person? If it was just that one person, fine. But if you're saying it all, have you had an experience that might have created that bias? And would I feel the same way if they were from a different group, if we switched it in our head? You'll get this stuff in that 3 Keys booklet, and we can also make these slides available, but it's a fascinating exercise. Now, here's a special application of this that I wanted to make sure that I shared with you. Compare what you first thought when encountering a person different from yourself with what you think after knowing them better. Get in that habit of doing that. Someone walks into your office or you see them on a call and you have a first thought about who they are, what their intelligence is, what their personality is going to be like, something like that. And then kind of notice that thought. And then as you get to know them better, see if it changes. That awareness, being very present with all of this stuff, is going to erode your tendency to do the biases. Frankly, I still have biases after all these years, but I got to tell you, I'm pretty good at noticing these things. I'm pretty good at noticing when I mess up and then learning from it. And that's what this helps you do. Okay, now let's go on to our final destination, defeating bias. First of all, pause, take a beat. I know this seems sort of simplistic, but a lot of work has been done. I'm thinking of the University of Toronto, a gentleman named William Cunningham. He did a lot of work on finding ways to assess what happens within the brain when it is allowed more time not to jump to a conclusion. So when you meet somebody new to you and you find yourself jumping to a conclusion, especially if you're busy and stressed, walk away for a minute. Heck, walk away overnight. Take a beat, count to 10. Give yourself an opportunity to get the rational part of your brain kicking in. It's very mechanical, what we're doing here, but it really can buy you time for the rational brain to kick in. They've done a lot of studies on this, again, primarily starting with Cunningham at university, measuring the amount of time that it takes the brain to respond quickly to the presence of a new group and jump to a conclusion, or following that, settle down into the rational thinking parts of the brain. And they found that it can happen pretty quickly, but you need to give it room to do it. I'm not talking, by the way, here about, I'm not being naive, about blatant racism and the like, sexism, all those blatant things. Yeah, maybe, but what nice people like you need before we jump to conclusion, take a beat, walk away, walk around the block, get off the phone for a few minutes and then get back on. Technique number 1, take a beat. The power of the pause is amazing. Now, ask 3 questions. I love this logic thing, okay? We are going to ask 3 questions to crack the foundation of bias. This is getting logical. Fundamentally, what you're doing is analyzing this bias out of existence. So Chris and Will are going to help us, and each of them is going to have a bias in their head. They already do. And do this yourselves. Remember this. And again, we can make the slides available. Do this yourselves. I know I seem excited, but frankly, it gets to be fun. All right. So I'm going to take them through, and all of you, through 3 questions. All right. And the first one is going to be, Alan, was the source of your bias reliable? Where did you learn it? This is great, by the way, if you do any in-house work on bias reduction, do a breakout group and ask people to think of a bias and ask them this question: was the source of your bias reliable? So Chris or Will, do you have example you'd like to give me in this case for you guys?
So I can start. And Sandra, we should start by actually talking about the bias itself.
If you're comfortable doing that. And so yeah, go, if you can, go ahead and do it. Yeah.
Sure. So I have, last summer, I have a story to go. The last summer,
good. That's great. No, that's good.
I had to drop something off to someone who lives in Englewood, which, if you're not from Chicago or familiar with Chicago, it's a neighborhood that is predominantly Black. So I'd say like over 95%. And they also have a very high percentage of families living under the poverty line. Mm-hmm. And when I was actually in the neighborhood, I realized I had forgotten something and I had to stop at a gas station to then buy this extra item.
Yeah.
And it was as I was walking into the gas station and I can see that there were a number of people inside, say 10 people, I began to feel this nervousness in my gut about how I thought these individuals were going to treat me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because you talked before about inflexible belief and pausing. I feel like logically in my head, I was trying to explain to myself, they're not going to be mean to you. They're not going to treat you differently. But in my gut, I had this fear or belief that it was going to be an uncomfortable experience. Again, that they were going to, I don't even know what it would be hostile or rude or
Sure.
what have you to me. And so I don't even know. I think probably the source of that is very complicated. I think that there's kind of a lot of societal messaging that gets to that belief. I think my default answer is probably no, but I think that probably came from a lot of different places in terms of source.
Yes, yeah, that is, see that, thank you for that, Chris. That moment, everybody, hear her, hear that. And I'm so relating to that in my own experience, and that awareness piece, it's that awareness thing right there, aware of our own discomfort. Fine, don't beat yourself up for it. You're aware of your own discomfort, goes in there, knows logically it's illogical, so goes ahead and then works it through. Does she still feel it? Yeah. But she worked it through, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone turned you into super friendly and super nice and all that. So, right?
Yeah.
So, and oh gosh, it'd be so great to be able to get deeper into this stuff about the difference between a working generality and a bias and all this kind of stuff. But this stuff is fascinating, and it's a matter of just staying alert. So, Will, do you have something you want to add to that? Do you have an example?
Thank you for sharing that, Chris. In my case, I believe I would say the source was reliable, yes, at a certain point. But I'm asking myself, so what reliables mean? What a reliable source means? So I think everything has a context. So if you talk about politics or talk about sports, your personal life, so what really reliable means in this case? So I have examples in my mind about, okay, every time I talk about someone I don't like, and let's say in politics, I have like a reaction that's different for a sport that I'm really engaged in a different sport. So that's it's still a question how to judge what is reliable or not.
Yes.
I don't know if you have anything we could help us to think about.
Yes. And I think that it's a matter of individual experiences. I've been working with some organizations around how can they draw that nuanced distinction between, a person has a negative experience with one individual, and they take that experience from that one individual and then broadens it to all the individuals. How can you work through that understanding? Yeah, that experience was real. Yeah, that stuff can happen. But how do we broaden that, keep our hearts and ourselves open? And that's sort of a whole other thing. But that awareness thing that you're talking about there, Will, is so important to the process. And that, I would think, this kind of thing, I'd be willing to talk perhaps to Charlene a little bit more about how you can take this back into your workplaces and do activities on your own around this issue of how can you wake up to the reliability, to overcoming the difference between this individual situation's dangerous. They exist. Dangerous situations exist. And am I bringing a generality to it that might even become a self-fulfilling prophecy in some way, or cause me to see it differently? So, and now if we go back to this one, questions, how many people do you actually know who conform to your bias? Okay. And when I say not actually know, I mean not rumor, not saw from a distance, not saw on television, and the like. And So for Chris and Will, Chris, so I almost want to answer Chris's for her, but I shouldn't. So how many people do you actually know, Chris, who are African American who might be threatening to you? I mean, really know?
Yeah, none.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
Everyone listen here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to seem preachy here, but listen to that. I mean, really know. Mm-hmm. And I look at when I have an inflexible belief, I go, okay, how many people do I really know? Okay, come on. And then every once in a while, I will know 2 people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, come on, not be naive here, and there are dangerous people in every population. Mm-hmm. But isn't it funny how we jumped that? And it's, so Will, do you want to add to that issue of actually know?
Actually, in case of my bias, I know people that conform with that.
You do, absolutely. And see, this is where we need to be sophisticated.
Yeah.
Their biases come, and I've got to be careful of time here, and I can feel myself wanting to go off on a tangent, so I'm going to control myself. Biases come from somewhere, right? We could get, if we were sitting in a small group, we could get into that issue in a nuanced way. And if we're exposed in certain environments, our biases, there may be more people who happen to conform to them. If we're in another environment, we never know anybody who conforms to them. It's a nuanced thing. What is so important is to remember that we take people individually at a time. We keep ourselves safe, of course, but we take individual after individual after individual. And the more we take people as individuals, sometimes we'll be right. Sometimes our bias will be right. And a bunch of time it won't be. A bunch of time it'll be kind of right, but not completely. Okay. And I could go give you examples now, but I'm concerned about the time. So it's not, absolutely tight and perfectly clean. Our job is to be logical, to be aware of our fears, and to work this through step at a time in an effort to see the individual in front of us for who that individual is. If that individual person happens to conform to an inflexible belief about a category of people that you had, they do, okay? But most likely they won't. They could, but that shouldn't send you off on a journey to find all the other people that also conform to it. You could say, okay, if they happen to, they come from somewhere, and I could go into this in greater depth with you, but it is a nuanced thing. But our job is to see the person in front of us. Let's go to a third question here before I move on to our final solution. I'm concerned about time. Do you know any people who did not conform to your belief? I'm going to answer that because of time here. We all do. We all have these quick responses, these inflexible beliefs about people, and we know a whole bunch of people that don't conform to them. But we have to become aware of that and pay attention to that. That is real. When there's fear involved or discomfort involved, we tend to remember the ones that do conform, right? And we tend to think they conform when they don't because we're scared that they will. It's that negative part, but all the ones that don't, we kind of don't take it in. This is all a matter of awareness. Let me move on. Thank you guys for your help on that. Let's go to technique number 3 so we can stay on time here. This is in your book that you're getting. Defeat bias by identifying common ground through shared kinship group. I'm going to really talk at you here a little bit. Kinship group, any population that shares a self or externally ascribed characteristic that sets it apart from others. Grandchildren, people that love nature, people that go to Ross, people that go to Becker, family units. It's any group that shares a characteristic of some sort, any group. That's what a kinship group is. It can be people that love dogs, people that love cats, people that manufacture potato chips, people that are sitting here on my block in San Diego, any group, okay? I'm going to rush here a little bit, so stay with me. Here's this principle. Identifying common ground, what we have in common, through a shared kinship group helps defeat bias because here's what happens. It transforms a them into an us. It does not mean they're not still them, okay? They are still them. They've got their own group, but we also have created an us. And this graphic, I think, will do it for you. All right, dog lovers, okay? I'm a dog lover, I go on record. A bunch of you are dog lovers, right? That's a group. That's a kinship group. And then there's cat lovers. That's real. They're a kinship group. And I think I've got, oh, there you go. There's a dog. I own that dog. And there's a cat. Okay. I'm not into cats, but it's still cute. Okay. Now, two different kinship groups, right? They've got something in common. But what do we do if we take the dog lovers and we take the cat lovers? And there's your shared group, animal lovers. Seems superficial. It isn't. Hold that image in your head when it comes to forming this third group. You're still cat lovers. You're still dog lovers. None of that's changed. But now you've got that shared group. And here's what happens. Creating an us, that's the us. You created an us, okay? Reduces bias because you tend to see members of your us, right, as individuals with unique qualities. And you tend to see members of them as all alike. It's the way the mind works, okay? This isn't saying we become all alike. This is saying that we find an area, perhaps it's at your school, where people focus on that sharedness while they honor the differences at the same time. So we see members of us as individuals less biased. We tend to see the individuals within our us as individuals not with an inflexible belief, because when we're in us, we tend to hang out together more, right? We're together more. So if you're just hanging out over there and I never see you, I keep looking at you as a group that's all kind of alike. Oh, look, they're all kind of alike, right? I get in there, I'm hanging with you, we spend more time, then we're individuals, and the bias, any inflexible belief I might have had about you starts to fade because I'm seeing a bunch of individuals. Secondly, when we're in us, we bring, this is physical, this is the brain, more neurons to the task of knowing people as individuals, and we use different parts of the brain. So when we focus on what we have in common at your school, at your workplace, what we have in common, we tend to begin to notice people as individuals within that. That does not mean we're not still honoring the difference. They are not incompatible, honoring individuals and honoring the difference. Finally, when we're in us, we no longer focus on the characteristics that they're different, that might form the basis of the bias. That doesn't mean we don't notice it. That doesn't mean we don't honor it. It just means it's not as big a deal. And you know, right now, this is interesting. Right now, oh, and I'm sorry about the time. Right now, I can almost feel some of you saying, oh yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, you know, we can still, I still know that you're different, but it's just, we're not making such a big deal out of it, okay? So, opportunities to get that commonality. The kind of contact you have, unhurried, cooperative, focusing on shared interests, focusing on personal interaction, involving common goals, and also those kinds of, these logical, it's logical. How can we get things together where people are really get to be themselves, but we're finding things we share? Encourage team members to reach out to people different from themselves. That's how you begin to cultivate this commonality. So you're looking for the commonality while you're honoring the differences within it. I think people have got it in their head, you can't do them both at the same time, but you can. And that's what's going to make for those wonderful conversations and the wonderful learning when you begin to talk about your family and you notice your family structure is different, but it's still family. So, you know, I know that you've got groups that you share, you know, Women's Network, you know, yearly volunteer day, working across departments, all those kinds of things. Those are the types of things that you do that help bring about this awareness of individuals through looking for honoring what you're different, but also the commonality. So let me just go through these. I'm not just put all these up. And what I'd like you to do before we wrap up is chat in to the box which, let's make it simple or harder in a way, which one of these 10 do you think is the single most important thing for creating a bias-free workplace? Remembering that they don't make us bad people, watching your first thoughts, pausing to give the rational brain a chance to take over, comparing your first assumption to a final reality and going, oh my gosh, where'd that come from? Asking yourself, was it a reliable source? How many people do I really know who conform to it? Watch for commonalities, interacting with people that are different, being alert to the negative impact and bias. That's sort of the, I want to do that. I know this is bad, so I'm not going to do it anymore. The motivation and being aware of the fact your biases can come sneaking back. Just toss in. I know we didn't speak of all of these, but we can get the slides to you and you'll have them. Toss in the chat a couple of these that you think are most important. I'm mostly really curious.
Pause, watch first thoughts, interact with people who are different. A lot of pause reactions, watch, interact.
Oh, it's all over the lot.
Watch.
A lot on awareness here. Good, 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 good. A lot on staying alert, isn't it? A lot on staying alert. Lovely. And again, hopefully we can get these slides to you. I just want to thank you. And I don't, oh, it looks according to my clock, we're 2 minutes over. I apologize for that. Don't know if you have time for questions, but we'll see. I want to thank you. If we do have time for questions, I'm available to anyone if you want to toss me questions or any other issues you want to talk about. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed being with you and learned a lot myself. Thanks very much.